At the grocery store, beef has become one of the clearest pressure points in the American food budget. In April 2026, the average retail price of ground beef in the U.S. city average was $6.899 per pound. That was 18.9% higher than 1 year earlier. All uncooked beefsteaks averaged $13.024 per pound, up 17.1% from the previous year. These are more than food price statistics. They are household numbers. They appear when a shopper reaches for a package of ground beef. They appear when a family compares one cut of meat with another. They appear when the same grocery list costs more than it did a year ago. The forces behind those prices begin far from the checkout lane. As of January 1, 2026, USDA reported that the United States had 86.2 million cattle and calves. Beef cows totaled 27.6 million. The calf crop was 32.9 million. Cattle on feed totaled 13.8 million. Each figure matters because beef does not move from ranch to grocery store in a single step. It passes through a long system of ranches, feedlots, processors, wholesalers, retailers, and households. When cattle supplies are tight, the entire system has less room to absorb pressure. That makes beef prices more than a supermarket issue. They are also a supply issue. The pressure did not appear suddenly. On August 9, 2022, Reuters reported that U.S. ranchers were reducing cattle herds because of drought and high feed costs. Tyson executives said at the time that cattle and beef prices were likely to rise into 2023 and 2024. That warning pointed to a basic economic problem. When ranchers reduce herds, future beef supply can become tighter. When future supply becomes tighter, the pressure can move through the chain into wholesale prices, retail prices, and household food budgets. By January 2026, USDA data showed that cattle inventory remained constrained. Cattle and calves totaled 86.2 million head. Beef cows totaled 27.6 million. The calf crop was down 2% from 2025. Cattle on feed were down 3%. Reuters also reported that the U.S. herd was at its lowest level since 1951. For ordinary shoppers, herd data may sound distant, but it is directly connected to the price tag on beef. A smaller cattle base means the beef supply chain has fewer animals moving through the system. That can place pressure on processors, wholesalers, and retailers. By April 2026, that pressure was visible in prices. USDA reported that retail beef and veal prices were 14.8% higher in April 2026 than in April 2025. Farm-level cattle prices were 17.7% higher year over year. Wholesale beef prices were 14.2% higher year over year. That sequence is important. Farm-level cattle prices show pressure near the beginning of the system. Wholesale beef prices show pressure before the grocery shelf. Retail beef and veal prices show what households face when they buy food. When all three levels are higher at the same time, the pressure is not limited to one part of the market. It is moving through the system. That system also includes major companies. On November 21, 2025, Reuters reported that Tyson Foods would close its beef plant in Lexington, Nebraska, affecting about 3,200 employees. Tyson also planned to reduce operations in Amarillo, Texas, affecting about 1,700 workers. The company cited low cattle supplies and said it would increase production at other facilities. That decision shows another dimension of the pressure. When cattle supplies are tight, the issue is not only the price of beef. It can also affect plants, workers, and local communities that depend on beef processing. For a grocery shopper, the visible issue is the price of ground beef or steak. For workers in Lexington, Nebraska, Amarillo, Texas, and other beef processing communities, the issue can also be employment and plant operations. The beef price story reaches beyond the meat case. By May 4, 2026, Tyson reported additional pressure inside its beef business. Reuters reported that Tyson's beef prices rose 11.5%. Beef sales volumes fell 13.1%. The company's beef-adjusted operating loss was $202 million for the quarter. Tyson also said cattle costs were up about $600 million. These figures show the squeeze from another angle. The company was receiving higher prices for beef. But its cattle costs were also higher, sales volume fell. Its beef business posted a large adjusted operating loss. For households, the meaning is straightforward. The system behind the grocery shelf was under financial pressure at the same time consumers were paying more. That does not mean every price change has one single cause. The verified data does not support reducing the entire story to one company, one decision, or one event. There was no single regulator or company action that created the beef price increase in the available sources. The verified record shows a combination of tight cattle supplies, higher cattle costs, higher wholesale beef prices, higher retail beef and veal prices, and major operational actions by beef processors. Another event showed how pressure continued inside the industry. On May 20, 2026, Reuters reported that Cargill locked out about 1,700 workers at its Fort Morgan, Colorado beef plant after slaughtering had been halted since April 23. The lockout followed failed contract talks. Cargill said facility costs exceeded returns and cited safety concerns around a possible work stoppage. That event was separate from the grocery price data, but it involved the same broader beef system. A major beef plant in Colorado had halted slaughtering, then workers were locked out in a labor dispute. For regular people, the relevance is direct. First, workers were affected at the plant level. In Fort Morgan, Colorado, about 1,700 workers were affected by the lockout. In Lexington, Nebraska, and Amarillo, Texas, Tyson's actions affected about 4,900 workers combined. Second, households were affected at the grocery level. In April 2026, shoppers paid $6.899 per pound for ground beef and $13.024 per pound for all uncooked beef steaks in the U.S. city average. These are daily life prices. A household does not need to follow cattle inventories to feel the effect. It sees the effect when a familiar package costs more. It sees the effect when beef and veal are 14.8% higher than a year earlier. It sees the effect when prices rise faster than expected. The broader pattern confirmed by the available data is a sustained cattle supply problem. USDA stated in May 2026 that the U.S. cattle herd has decreased since 2019. USDA and ASS data showed cattle and calves at 86.2 million head as of January 1, 2026. Beef cows were 27.6 million. Cattle on feed were down 3% from 2025. The calf crop was down 2%. These numbers describe a system with limited supply growth. Beef supply cannot be rebuilt instantly. The verified research does not give a timetable for recovery, so it would be wrong to invent one. But the data does show that pressure was still present in 2026. That is where the situation stood. As of May 2026, retail beef and veal prices were still elevated compared with the prior year. Farm-level cattle prices were higher. Wholesale beef prices were higher. Tyson expected its fiscal 2026 adjusted beef segment operating loss to be between $350 million and $500 million. The unresolved issue is not simply whether beef prices move up or down in any single month. The unresolved issue is that the supply chain behind beef remains under pressure, while households are already paying higher prices. For a middle-class family, this is not an abstract commodity story, it is a grocery bill story. For a beef plant worker, it is not only a food inflation story. It can be a job and community story. For ranchers and processors, it is a supply and cost story. And for the country's food system, it shows how the price on a grocery shelf is often the final step in a much longer chain. The verified facts point to a clear sequence. Ranchers reduced herds after drought and high feed costs were reported in 2022. The U.S. cattle herd remained tight by January 2026. Retail, wholesale, and farm-level beef prices were all higher by April 2026. Tyson closed and reduced beef operations affecting thousands of workers. Cargill locked out workers at a Colorado beef plant after slaughtering had been halted. Households were paying sharply higher prices for ground beef and steak. That is why beef has become a new grocery pressure point. Not because of one headline, not because of one company, but because pressure built inside the cattle and beef system moved through processors and wholesale markets and reached the place where ordinary people feel it most clearly, the grocery bill.